All right, Steve. What is Bufferbloat?
Okay, our listeners who are live can start something up in the background while we're talking, so that when we get down to where we're talking about what this is, they may have some results.
I've done it already, and I have my results.
Cool. This is episode 345 of Security Now. So I've done what I've done before, which is create a bit.ly link with the episode number, bit.ly/SN345.
bit.ly/SN345.
Yep. And I made it both uppercase SN and lowercase SN, so that it didn't matter which people used this time. That will take you to the what's called the netalyzr, which has been put together by the ICSI at berkeley.edu at UC Berkeley. That's the International Computer Science Institute. It is a Java applet, and I tweeted this link in preparation for the podcast earlier this morning and got some of our listeners who sent back, Steve, that's Java. What's happened to you? You're running Java? It's like, yes, we have no choice. I mean, so I got a couple of people say, well, I'll install it just for this because it sounds really interesting, but then I'm uninstalling it. It's like, okay, fine. You know, I mean, we're losing this battle against scripting. So I'm accepting that, you know, scripting is the future. The beauty of this application in Java, this is a stunning piece of work. And when I'm looking at what they can do in Java, I'm thinking, ooh, I could do some amazing stuff, which has the benefit of being platform agnostic, which is really important, being able to do low-level, packet-level work on a you know, and writing it once and being able to run it across platforms. Of course, it won't run on an iPad. You need to have something that'll run Java, and the iPad won't, in the same way that it won't run Flash. But you do get both Mac and PC. So, yes, this is a Java applet. Let it run. It takes a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and there is one of the things it does is measure the size of your buffers. That is underload the latency of that the buffering between you and them has. And
by the way, we have killed the site, so people go later. Don't go, you know, everybody went all at the same time. And we killed the
you
site.
Mean we killed Berkeley?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. Berkeley.edu is down, my friends.
Actually, when I tweeted it, that happened.
Yeah.
And I even tweeted about One ID like a week or two ago, and they went down.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it does. Yeah. People don't build sites. You know this. They don't build sites for the peak. They build them for the average. It's too expensive.
Yeah, you cannot afford to build them for the peak.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when we send 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 people to a site, of course most sites will go down.
Bye. Okay, let's step back. We've in the past created a perfect foundation of knowledge about the way the internet works for understanding the problem with buffering. We understand that instead of a modem connection where you actually have the equivalent of wires from the sender to the receiver, and you know exactly what the bandwidth is, because that's the baud rate of the modem or the bandwidth of your point-to-point hardwired connection. That's all gone now. And I remember describing how, what a conceptual leap it was in the minds of the original designers, the concept that you could create virtual connections, not actual physical connections, but the equivalent of a virtual connection with the agreement between endpoints that they were connected by maintaining some state information, some knowledge at each end about the condition and the history of their connection, and then having them just launch packets of data towards each other, which the intervening internet of routers would arrange to get to the other end. And I've talked about routers buffers before in this context, where if you think of a router as like a star, like a hub with a bunch of connections coming out of it, going in, north, south, east, west, and in other compass directions, and packets are coming in on various of those connections to interfaces on the router. Then they go into the routing core of the router, which examines the IP address at the front of the packet and decides, using its routing table, which is the best interface to send the packet back out on. So the timing of all of this is uncertain. These packets are arriving on all these different wires coming into the router whenever they want to, asynchronously, and it's having to sort of shuffle them around, look at them, and then send them back out. But if by chance a bunch of packets came in on 3 lines that all wanted to go out on a 4th line, and assuming for a second that these lines were all the same speed, well, if 3 came in, or if a bunch of packets came in from 3 lines, they can't all go out at once. They have to be lined up. So interfaces in interfaces in routers have buffers. They have a staging area where packets can be placed to sort of deal with these little brief events. The need to deal with the fact in this, as a consequence of this autonomous routing, where we've just got packets flying all over in every direction. A consequence of that is that we need some buffer. We need to deal with the possibility that there'll be moments where a connection is saturated, and where it's not so saturated that we have to throw things away. Because if we had no buffer, then we would be over discarding packets. But one of the other weird consequences of this multi-links between routers, we've got links, our Wi-Fi from our laptop on the couch to our Wi-Fi router. Then there's a link to maybe our DSL modem or our cable modem. Then there's the cable link to the ISP's network. Then there's multiple routes through the ISP. Then there's their link to the internet. Now we're on, finally, well, after all those links, we're on the core of the internet. So then we've got multiple major tier 1 providers, like Level 3, for example, and others that are major carriers, and they get the traffic over to another ISP where, through many links, it gets back to its destination. So all of these links, probably, almost without exception, they're running at different speeds. There's big, hefty, multi-gig fiber links. There's gig E Ethernet links. There's 100 base T links. There's who knows what between the cable modem or what the cable modem is actually doing in terms of its connection. Then there's a link between it and your Wi-Fi router, and then there's your Wi-Fi link. And we know that actual Wi-Fi performance varies greatly depending upon the signal strength and multipath interference and various things that the Wi-Fi system is doing in order to make it work. So I mean, it's just, when you stand back and you look at this, it's amazing, frankly, that any data gets anywhere at all. But what's significant is that there is no way to know what the bandwidth is because of all of these links and routers. That is, it's one thing to talk about buffering. Think about buffering as sort of, short-term overage handling, where just in an instant, 3 packets can all want to go out one wire, and they just got to line up a little bit. But if over time if over time many input feeds were saturated that all wanted to go to one output feed that was no faster than the inputs, then more data would be coming into that router than it was possible for it to send out. And so it would have no choice but to drop packets. Its buffer would fill, and then no more could get in. And so it just wouldn't have. They keep coming in on the wire, but there's nowhere for it to put them. It can't get rid of them fast enough. So it's got to just discard them. And we've discussed this. That's the genius of the original designers, was that they said, okay,
throw it out.
Not all packets have to get there.
Right.
They made peace with that, which had to have given them some sleepless nights. But they said, okay, we're just going to make. I mean, that's the trade-off of a packet switching network. Is we can't guarantee that that you're going to be able to send as much as you want, because other people could be competing with you on the same thoroughfare, and you can't get there. So you'll have to back off. You'll have to throttle back. And that is the genius of the TCP protocol. Remember that we've talked about the way TCP works. It starts off slowly, the so-called TCP slow start. When you initiate a connection to a remote server, your computer doesn't know how much bandwidth you've got. It doesn't know how fast it can send the data. So it starts sending it and hopes for the best. And as time goes by, it sends the data faster and faster and faster. What it's trying to do is trying to sense when the link gets saturated. And because of all these hops and all these links that may be running at different speeds and may have differing levels of congestion, we don't know where we're going to have a problem. But at some point along the way, there will be a situation where packets are lost. They may be lost due to a momentary surge where there's competing traffic, or they could be lost at any point, and this is a key concept, at any point where the bandwidth drops. Any point where you go from a high bandwidth flow to a reduced bandwidth, you're going to have a problem, because up until then, you've been able to send packets at high speed. As soon as you drop to lower bandwidth, as we've seen, there will probably be a buffer of some sort there. So it'll be some device which is doing the best job it can, but you're just giving it more than it can send. So it has no choice but to discard something. So the brilliance of TCP is that it senses the loss of packets when the packets it's sending are not being acknowledged. When it fails to get acknowledgement, it assumes packet loss. So it backs off. It slows down in order to sort of adjust to having hit the ceiling. Now, it doesn't know whether that was a fixed bandwidth limit that it hit, and so that it should just stay where it is, or that it could have equally been a burst of congestion somewhere along the way that's gone now. So it always creeps back up. And so what TCP is always doing is sort of riding just under the ceiling of what it's able to establish, of the bandwidth. It's always trying to push a little harder, and when it gets the news back that, whoops, packets apparently have been dropped because it's not getting acknowledgments of their receipt from the far end, then it takes that as, oops, okay, I found the ceiling again, back off a little bit, and then it begins to creep forward. So that's been the solution. But what that depends upon is low latency. That is, that depends upon, by its nature, that soon after it's going too quickly, it receives notice that it's not. And I was trying to think, Leo, of the best analogy, and I got a great one that everyone can relate to. And we've all seen on newscasts how painful it is for two people to talk over a satellite delay, which is substantial.
Yeah. Yeah, you see it on CNN all the time, this long lag.
Or bless his heart, Chris Matthews cannot shut up. And he it's
on MSNBC. You have to just stop talking. That's the only way to handle it.
Yes. Well, what he does is worse because, and I've watched this over and over and over. He'll be talking to somebody, in Iraq, and then the person's sitting there patiently waiting because Chris loves the sound of his own voice.
Yeah.
And so Chris finally ends with a question.
Yeah.
And then, just as the other person hears the end of it, Chris thinks of a better question.
Yeah.
And so asks him, he sort of amends that question and goes on. And so you see the other guy beginning to respond, and then he hears Chris change his mind about the question. It's just like, oh, my God.
Yeah, painful.
Anyway, so the point is, what is that? That is two people, two entities trying to interact in a real-time fashion in the face of delay, that latency.
Right.
And it's you just can't do it. It creates a problem. And so what has happened is, over time, all of the specifications have been laid out beautifully. If you look at the RFCs, they everything I've talked about is spelled out in detail. Nowhere does it talk about the size of the buffers.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Never comes up. Yeah. Never did come up. Now, It used to be that RAM was expensive. So buffers were small because even Cisco making big iron routers, they were trying to get as much profit margin as they could, and hardware was expensive 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So the buffers were small. And also, these were the engineers who designed the internet. They knew that packets were supposed to be dropped. And that's I've said it in our original tutorial series on how the internet works. That's the genius of packet routing is, packet got dropped. We couldn't get it there. And all the protocols have been designed with that in mind. TCP sets its speed, assuming that immediately after the bandwidth is hit, it will get a notification that lets it back off. But now what happened? Everything got cheap. Chips get big. RAM, huge amounts of RAM is built into the ARM processors. Just because, why not? We keep making the die sizes larger, and the details we're able to imprint on the chips are becoming ever smaller. We're able to increase the transistor count dramatically. So being able to say, this thing's got 256 megs of RAM. Well, it doesn't cost anything. And so the router vendors, really, who are not the internet engineers that founded Cisco and Jupiter and the major backbone providers of the internet, they're thinking, hey, we can have larger buffers, and then packets won't get dropped. Won't that be wonderful? Well, turns out the answer is no. That's really bad. Because what happens is, it is often at the client router, at the end user router, that we have the biggest drop in bandwidth. That is where we go from large bandwidth pipes to a restricted bandwidth. And if this router has large buffers, and now we're talking, I mean, they could be, and in fact, in some they are megabytes, because the RAM is there. It's free. It's on the chip. You know, and it would take a certain amount of self-control for the designer to say, I'm only going to use 10K when he's got a meg. And when he thinks, oh, you know, not understanding this, thinking that dropping packets is bad. Turns out, no, dropping packets is really important. It's the only way that TCP knows how fast it can go. And if you allow TCP to keep going faster, it will fill this huge buffer. And only when this huge buffer is full will packets start getting dropped. The problem is that, remember that it's the acknowledgement of unreceived packets, which is, or I'm sorry, it's the non-acknowledgement of packets that were not received that tells TCP to stop. So what happens? TCP keeps filling this buffer, which then goes into it drops in bandwidth. There's a constraint before it gets to the end point. Well, the end point is happy because it's still getting data from the buffer. So it's continuing to acknowledge the correct receipt of the packets incoming, which continues to encourage the sender to not only keep sending them, but to send them faster. So this buffer continues to fill. It starts even filling up faster now because due to its depth, the recipient is still getting data from this big buffer and acknowledging, so the sender keeps cranking it forward. So what ends up happening is we end up, as a consequence of this delay, we end up delaying the news to the sender that a long time ago we hit our bandwidth limit. Well, what TCP does is it backs off by a percentage. It assumes timely notification. So if you put a big buffer there, it backs off by a percentage of what it was sending. But the buffer has been so big that it has gone way beyond the recipient's actual ability to receive. So even backing off a bit doesn't solve the problem. It's still going too fast. And then it backs off again, and it's still going too fast, and again, and it's still going too fast. So you end up with this big problem caused by a buffer which is too deep. Now the other thing that happens is the phenomenon that people see at home, and this is what got Jim Geddes, who is the person a year and a half ago who got onto this problem. He noticed that interactive gaming came to a standstill when he was downloading a file. Or, no, I think he was uploading a file, actually. So the idea was that he was uploading a file, and even the reverse direction had a problem. Well, the reason that happens is notice that we've got data for TCP. Acknowledgements have to go back also. So if you've got a buffer, a large, meg buffer, which is full to the brim, then carrying one flow of traffic, then what's happened is you've introduced a delay. You may not care if the movie you're downloading to watch later isn't, that you don't care about the real-time performance of that, but you care about the real-time performance of web surfing, where inherently you're getting a page that page comes in, and you're wanting to set up a whole bunch of new connections to all the other places that this page needs to be built from. And so the web page is highly interactive. But if you've got your router buffer, an overly large router which has been allowed to fill up with traffic from a download going on, suddenly now other traffic is stuck at the end of it. If it can even get in, it may be discarded prematurely because this buffer's full with someone else's work. And even if it wasn't, we require the assumption on the internet is a round trip time on the order of 100 milliseconds. 100 milliseconds is out and back is sort of, that was the target that these protocols were designed around. And maybe it's 200, maybe it's 150, 156. I'm looking at my own round trip, and I'm seeing looks like about 60 milliseconds between here and GRC, and I'm actually going up to Northern California before I jump onto level 3 and come back to GRC's servers. And I see a worst case of about 158 milliseconds. And, that's what ping shows you when you ping something. So you could, use the ping command to ping Google or ping Microsoft or ping Yahoo and get a sense for what your round trip time is. But, it's relatively fast. And web surfing, interactive use depends upon that kind of performance, that kind of speed. So if we have a large buffer in our router, as long as it's empty, we're fine. We'll get good interactive performance. But as soon as it fills up, if it's ever allowed to fill up, that large buffer equals delay if it's full. And then quote, the internet is slow is what everyone else in the family starts saying. Even if there's like ample bandwidth, you could have 100 meg down and 1 meg up. Yet if you saturate that 1 meg up, sending a file out, for example, nothing can come back because the protocols have to have acknowledgments get back in a timely fashion, and even saturating your outbound buffer keeps your incoming data from being able to be acknowledged. So this problem we got into unintentionally with router manufacturers just sort of thinking they were doing the right thing turns out to be really more trouble than it's worth. Notice that big file you're sending cannot get to you any faster than the slowest bandwidth link. It can't. Nothing can squeeze it through. So having that big buffer sitting there trying to squeeze it through doesn't get it there any faster. If the buffer were only 10K, so that it's only 8 or 9 packets, then that doesn't mean it's going to go slower. What that means is that little buffer will overflow immediately, and an acknowledgement will be sent back telling the sender back off a little bit, and then the buffer will clear up. But that little buffer will allow all the other things going on in the household to stay interactive even when a big file is being downloaded. And that's the key. These large buffers allow large download traffic to block interactivity. And in many situations, that's a deal killer. You don't want that. And it doesn't help the bigger traffic to go faster. Due to this weirdness of the way packets are moved around the internet, it's not going to go faster than it needs to through the slowest link you've got. And you're much better served only buffering just enough to deal with transients, and it doesn't make any sense to buffer larger than that because it breaks our signaling. Okay, so there is this netalyzr, I'm sure everyone listening is now wondering, oh my God, what's the situation with my network?
I've run it here and at home already. I was very curious. This is a neat thing. I guess this is something they're doing at Berkeley as part of a large-scale study. So not only is it a great service for us, but by using it, you're helping them collect data about network in general.
Yes, exactly. They do some aggregate record keeping by IP, so they're able to see that these ISPs are doing this and those ISPs are doing that. And they also collect, without IP, just overall general operation. So I ran it on myself, and remember that I've got a pair of T1 trunks. They each go at 1.54 megabits, and they're bonded together, so I get the sum of their bandwidth. So sure enough, this thing said, for me, network bandwidth, upload 2.9 megabits per second, download 2.9 megabits per second.
That's what you'd expect.
Exactly. I mean, I was very impressed that they nailed that. And they said, your uplink, we measured your uplink sending bandwidth at 2.9 megabits per sec. It says, this level of bandwidth works well for many users. During this test, the applet observed 1,551 reordered packets. Now, that's actually a high number, but that's a consequence of the fact that I have two T1s. So normally you wouldn't see that high a reordering count, but it's because my two T1s are, packets are going across either one, and they might be coming out in a different sequence. Then they said, your download link, we measured your download link's receiving bandwidth at 2.9 megabits per second. This level of bandwidth works well for many users. During this test, the applet observed 696 reordered packets. Now,
that sounds like a lot.
Oh, it is because of my two T1s. But again,
this is why your Skype sucks, by the way. Well, it may not be the only reason, because keep going.
Okay. Network buffer measurements. Uplink, 940 milliseconds.
That's a lot.
Well, but remember, only if the buffer's full. But so yes, uplink is almost a second, 940 milliseconds. That is a large uplink buffer.
Right.
And then downlink, 370 milliseconds.
That's not so bad.
So they say, we estimate your uplink as having 940 milliseconds of buffering. This level can in some situations prove somewhat high, and you may experience degraded performance when performing interactive tasks such as web surfing while simultaneously conducting large uploads. Real-time applications such as games or audio chat may also work poorly when conducting large uploads at the same time.
So it's okay as long as you're not doing other things?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, it's only the buffer. The buffer only introduces a delay when it's full. If the buffer is just cruising along, packets come in one or two and they immediately leave, then it's not introducing any delay.
We do have some of the worst Skype from you, and it's really should be the best. And I do suspect now, is that your router buffer, that delay, or is that a T1 artifact?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I'm looking. Let me look at mine. We have EFM, Ethernet to the first mile on this computer, and it's showing network buffer of uplink 110 milliseconds, very low.
Nice.
And then it says downlink is good. It's not giving me any details on that.
Huh.
I don't know why. We were not able to produce enough traffic to load the downlink buffer, or the downlink buffer is particularly small, which was what we would like, right?
Yeah. Now, and see, and that exactly speaks to my point. They were the way they were able to determine my uplink bandwidth was by specifically generating enough traffic to overflow it.
Right.
And that's what it took, was like figuring out how much traffic, generating enough traffic to overflow it. Because lesser traffic than that won't, the buffering is not a problem.
Now at home I'm on Comcast. This is my home computer, and it's running an Apple router, and it's considerably worse. The speeds are better. The upload is 5 megabits, download 20 megabits, greater than 20 megabits. But the uplink is 260 milliseconds, and the downlink is 98 milliseconds.
Well,
so that's
still good. It's still good compared to me.
Yeah, what router do you use?
I have a Cisco 3400. I mean, I've got a big iron router.
Huh.
No, I mean not a Cisco plastic box.
No, the high end one.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Well, your numbers are wouldn't you say they're less than optimal?
I'll do some poking around. Well, I just ran this an hour ago, so
I think this is fascinating. So you look at the network access link properties, right? That's the section that you want to look at. Is that right?
And it's network buffer measurements is what it says.
And is that directly related to the router, or could there be other?
Well, see, yes, that's the problem, and that's why I'm saying I don't know yet. I haven't had a chance to research this, because this is buffering somewhere between me and them.
Right.
So it's not necessarily my buffers. It could be, Cogent, my T1 provider could have their system misconfigured. And see, that's the other reason. I don't know why these are different, why uplink and downlink are different, because my router is doing nothing. It's just sitting here directly sending stuff out of my T1 lines. I see no reason that there should be anything asymmetric. Notice that my bandwidth was exactly 2.9 in each direction. So it may not be me that's doing the buffering. It could be Cogent that's doing the buffering. Mm-hmm. And so it's not within my control. Now, you can imagine buffering is important enough that a lot of thought has gone into this. The typical brain dead buffer is a simple FIFO that we've talked about, a first in, first out. And so the overflow behavior of a FIFO buffer is called tail drop, meaning that it just drops the packet from the tail of the buffer. It no more will fit in, so it discards it. But because a lot of work has gone into this, engineers have said, okay, how can we, yes, losing packets, dropping packets is the nature of the internet. It's going to happen. How can we make it smarter? For example, how can we be more fair about competing traffic? If, one high bandwidth user should not be allowed to fill and saturate the buffer, because then an interactive user who would like to have, doesn't need that much bandwidth, and if we could just sneak him in a little bit, then he could be happy with his low bandwidth interactivity while the big transfer goes on in the background. The problem is that requires extreme knowledge of the nature of the flows, and routers don't have that. Routers just see packets coming in, and they go, okay, fine, and trying to send it out to the best direction it can. But a technology was developed called random early detection, RED. What random early detection does is, as the buffer is beginning to fill, not once it's filled and we have to drop things off the tail, but as it fills, the router increases the statistical likelihood of discarding a packet, even that it has room for. It just says, the buffer's beginning to fill up. Let's just toss this one out, because tossing them out, as we know, is a healthy thing to do on the internet. And as the buffer continues to fill, it increases the likelihood of tossing packets out. And what this means is that if somebody was greedy with their particular flow, the likelihood of their packets being tossed out statistically is greater than the likelihood of somebody who's not using that many packets having theirs tossed out. So it tends to throttle the people who have more packets in the buffer, and not so much those that don't have that many packets in the buffer. And the idea being that theoretically you never get to a point of actually saturating the entire buffer, because you exponentially increase the probability of discarding packets as it continues to fill. And the beauty of that is, for example, that allows TCP to get an early notice. Ooh, and I forgot about one other horrible thing that happens. If you've got, remember when I was talking about how a big buffer gets full and then TCP keeps sending and increasing its speed because it doesn't know any better, because the receiver is still getting valid packets and acknowledging them from this big buffer. One other thing that happens is called TCP global synchronization. If multiple TCP flows are going through, then what happens is all of their traffic begins to stall at the same time, but none of them get the notice. They all get over-ramped. Then finally they all shut down. And what can happen is, as a consequence of this, is all of the TCP connections can essentially synchronize. So rather than you'd like them to be hitting their ceilings at different times, so that they're backing off and scaling and sort of cohabitating nicely. But if you end up with a big buffer, the phenomenon of the way TCP backs off is they can end up falling into sync. And this has been something that's been seen in routers on the internet, where there's like this surge and then stop and surge and then stop, and you sort of get into this oscillating positive feedback phenomenon, which is really bad. Because, I mean, it's just like, it starts to really break the internet. So the good news is that attention is being paid to this. This hasn't really, I don't think it's reached critical mass yet where router manufacturers are acknowledging it. But as you'd expect, the open WRT people are. There's a site called Bufferbloat.net which is where there's been a concentration of work. There is a variant of the Open WRT project called CERO, CERO WRT, which is now at beta 2, and they're only supporting one of the more popular Netgear, I think it is. I want to say N600, but I'm not sure. That's just from memory. I didn't write this down. But so we are beginning to see some firmware for Open WRT class routers, which they're using the latest Linux kernel. I think it's 3.3. Typically, routers, I think, are back on 2.6 point something for their firmware. This project is using the latest Linux kernel because Linux is experimenting with the Bufferbloat problem. And in the 3.3 kernel, they've got something called BQL, which is a byte queue limit. They limit the number of bytes in the queue rather than the number of packets, using a rather sophisticated strategy, and something called SFQRED, which is stochastic fair. Yes, stochastic fair queuing random early drop.
Oh, that's an acronym.
Yes. Anyway, that's where we stand. I expect that in the future, in the advanced configuration pages of the better Soho routers, we will see configuration settings that allow smart homeowners to introduce smarter buffer management and probably manually reduce the buffer size. I read an interesting dialogue among these engineers that were explaining that there's a problem, and that is that if a router manufacturer deliberately used smaller buffers, then competitors with large buffers could claim that the better router was inferior because it dropped more packets and had smaller buffers. And unwitting users would go, oh, well, that sounds like I don't want that router, when in fact it would give you much better performance
right.
on your network.
Well, I'm glad to know that it's software configurable. I mean, in other words, you could use a custom firmware and fix it. It's not even though the hardware has the RAM, you can reduce it.
Oh yeah, you just don't use so much.
Yeah.
And in fact, it turns out even that there are even device drivers. This Linux 3.3 has improved device drivers because, again, RAM got so cheap and there's so much RAM in our PCs that our own network adapters have too much buffers down in the kernel,
wow.
down in the driver.
Jeez Louise.
Because it's like, well, we got RAM, we don't want to throw these packets away when in fact you'd like to. And I did see one interesting comment on in a dialogue where someone said, well, there's a problem with sending out lots of little bursts, which is what you have to do if you have small buffers, because for power conservation, having a large transmit queue allows the processor, like in a smartphone, to put a whole bunch of data into the queue and then sleep itself, shut itself down, so that a lower power portion of the chip is able to go and send off that data, and the CPU is not consuming so much power. Whereas if you had much smaller buffers, it would have to be constantly waking up and shutting down much more rapidly, and so as a percentage, you end up being alive longer than if you were able to shut down for a long period of time. Right. So there's a lot to be determined yet, but that's the story of Bufferbloat. And
when is the optimal buffer size? Can you say that?
And that's just it. There isn't one.
Right.
It's so confounding because it's a function of round trip time and bandwidth and speed and usage characteristics.
Right.
There is no optimum. But what's happened is we know that too big is really bad,
right.
And too small, you want it enough to deal with transients, yet you still want the total round trip time. And see, this is it. If you just do a ping will give you your no buffer delay round trip time.
Right, because it's such a small amount of data.
Yes. So do this. Ping Google and see what that is.
Yeah. Then
start downloading a podcast from twit.tv and ping again. And you also have to wait a bit. You have to wait for the buffer to fill. So wait a while, or just go ahead and start pinging, and what you will probably
watch it go down. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so you will begin to see the round trip time increasing, not because you're getting further away from Google, but because the buffers are filling, and your ping is having to wait in line, wade through that buffer to get to the front before it can finally leave, and the same thing happens in reverse.
Right.
So it's not unfilled buffers that are the problem. The buffers themselves are not the problem. It's that they're allowed to get too deep, and that creates latency. And the internet was not designed. It was designed for on the order of 100 milliseconds of latency. I've seen some reports of 6 second buffers.
That's not good.
Buffers that are 6 seconds deep. Now you might as well just
forget it.
Hang up, go home. Yes.
By the way, this netalyzr gives you a lot of other interesting information.
Oh, it's a fantastic application.
I'm looking at certain TCP protocols are blocked in outbound traffic. Not all DNS types are correctly processed. There's a lot of diagnostic information in here.
Yes.
This is my home router, which of course has some sort of something going on. Probably Comcast. It's blocking remote SMB servers. Well, that's probably right.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. But I have to say, Russell, our IT guy here, is so good that our router is well configured here at the studio for minimal. He's done a great job for minimal latency, great speed. That's why we get such good results. But Steve, I want you to look at your router. You're getting too many packet reordering. Too much of that. If you want to know more about this show, he's silent. But we do. It's funny. We have, given that you have such a rock solid setup, it always puzzles me that we have occasional audio breakups with you, sometimes weird results.
But what I will
you.
do is I will, for our next podcast next week, I will shut down one of my T1s. Because what did you see, by the way, for packet reordering?
0.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. And you're right. I don't know how Skype handles reordering. If it's buffering, if it sees them out of order at all, it might just drop anything that's not coming along. Anyway, I'll shut down a T1, and we'll try a podcast next week with only one T1. I can do it trivially, so it's not a problem at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that might be, it's funny, but this is a perfect example. Less sometimes is more. More sometimes is less. Actually, I'm sorry. I had 10 reordered packets. Wait a minute. Which? Okay, now I have this.
Yeah,
no,
but I had 900.
That was at home. 10 was at home. Let me see on the.
And I had 1,551.
Yeah, we had no reordering here in the studio, and I had 10 reorders at home.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that's the dual T1s. Maybe just let's disable it next time. Yep. Because you have plenty. 1.4 megabits up is plenty for Skype.
Yep.
That's.
I will shut one down, and we'll see how it does.
Steve is the master, and you can find out more by going to his website, grc.com. That's where you'll get, of course, the fantastic SpinRite, world's finest hard drive, maintenance and recovery utility. You'll also get all his free doohickeys, his security stuff, and copies of the podcast, 16 kilobit audio and transcriptions. Those are only available at grc.com. Next week, a feedback episode. So while you're there, if you've got a question, just leave a question at grc.com/feedback. And otherwise, if you want the video or the high-quality audio or you just want to subscribe, you can do that at twit.tv. We do this show live every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 1800 UTC. So stop by and watch live. Always fun. Then you can watch the chat room as it does its tests and brings netalyzr down. It's fun. It's fun. And it's been fun watching. There's such a wide variety. We have somebody in Britain who's got amazing bandwidth, 25 pounds for BT Infinity. And he's just got 45 megabits up and down or something like that. It's incredible.
Wow.
It's incredible. But there's a wide variety of ping times. We've got people with 1900 millisecond ping times.
That's 2 seconds.
That's too much buffering.
Yep. Wow.
Yeah. What a great subject. And more to come, I'm sure, on this one. Steve, thank you so much.
Thanks, Leo.
We'll see you next week on Security Now.
Security Now.
Steve, what is CoDel?
Okay, so CoDel is the way you pronounce the name of what will end up probably being the buffer management strategy, which ends up dominating the internet over time. Sadly, we all have devices which are probably using what's known as tail drop, which is the official term for if the buffer's full, throw away, and there's no room to put a packet. Well, what can we do? Throw it away. So let's rewind a little bit and remember how we got here. The fundamental, always understood problem with an autonomous packet routing network is the need for buffering. Because if you imagine like a lattice grid of nodes all connected to each other in a very complex topology where customers are located off of different of these nodes, and they put their internet traffic onto a given node, that is to say a router, and it sends it to the next one, which sends it to the next one, which sends it to the next one. So you've got all this traffic jumping from one router to the next as it goes from its source to its destination and back again. And if you do like a trace route command, the number of hops, as they're called, between routers, certainly it varies, but we're used to seeing something like 13 to 17, something like that. And we've talked about how the so-called internet diameter, that is a diameter of a circle, is of course the 2 points that are the farthest possible away. Similarly, the diameter of the internet would be the 2 locations that have the largest number of routers between them, so that the data has to go through that many hops. And there was a problem that the so-called TTL, the time to live, was originally set at a number that was at the time reasonable, maybe 16 or 32. Generally, programmers like powers of 2. But it turns out that as the internet grew in size, more routers were added, and it was possible for an operating system to generate a packet that would never be able to make it to its destination because its time to live would expire before then. So because we've got all of this sort of this ebb and flow happening statistically, but without any overall plan, just every packet for himself, it's necessary to buffer both packets coming into a router, because they might be coming in from like you might have 5 or 6 all arrive at once from different interfaces, and then the router figures out which interfaces each one needs to go back out of, and you then need to put those in a queue, so that is to say a buffer, so that they can move as soon as there's space available and time on the outgoing wire. So buffering has always been present. The problem, as we discussed it when we talked about Bufferbloat in detail, is that there's been a tendency, as the price of memory has fallen, now there's just more and more RAM in these single chip processors that all of our consumer routers are based on, and it's counterintuitive to a network engineer to think, wait a minute, I have a perfectly good packet here, and I have free buffer space. Why should I drop it? I've got room for it. And the reason is there's a very subtle interplay between the overall efficiency of our protocols and time delay. Big buffers create a time delay where more data is coming in than is able to go out. I mean, anyone can sort of think of the model of a funnel, where if you put a lot of stuff in the wide open end of a funnel and it's going out slowly, well, the funnel itself captures the material that's trying to get out through the smaller opening, and it holds it for a while. So any given grain of sand sits in this funnel queue waiting for its chance to finally get out of the funnel, rather than if you were only pouring in sand at the rate it could flow out, then the delay through the funnel would be as near to zero as it can be. Just, the grain of sand's own passage through. There wouldn't be a backlog. So it's this backlog which represents a problem, and backlogs form anytime you have a transition from a high bandwidth connection to a lower bandwidth connection. If you are sending things in at the high bandwidth speed, they're going to have to back up. They're going to backlog. So many, as we've discussed before, many strategies have been designed. In fact, it's an acronym soup of strategies. I mentioned tail drop, which is the dumb one, the dumbest one, which is buffer everything until when a new packet comes in that needs to wait and there is no place for it, we just drop it. Now, again, as we've talked about packet switching, the way that works, it's inherently in the design of the internet to tolerate dropped packets. Routers are supposed to drop packets. And what's interesting is that's informational. That actually, the dropping of a packet in transit indirectly sends information back to the sender, because the recipient never receives the dropped packet. thus never acknowledges the receipt. And so the original protocol designers designed the internet to function with the assumption of dropped packets and to deal with it. So engineers that engineered larger buffers, and unfortunately these things chain. So if every router between here and there has a big buffer, then you can end up with many, many seconds required to get your data to transfer from one place to the other. And if we were only transferring big files, that wouldn't be such a problem. But, you and I, Leo, are having a conversation in near real time over the internet.
It's kind of amazing.
And so, we don't want to have a grain of sand stuck in a funnel where that's my voice trying to get to you. We want it. And so these deep buffers really do not help anybody. What we want is we want them to catch bursts. We want them to be a surprise. Oh, whoa, suddenly more came in than we was expecting. Well, as long as it doesn't persist, as long as that was like a surprise event that will then quickly be removed, that's fine. That's proper use of a buffer, but not something that just sits there full and clogged with sand running over the sides of the funnel because more is coming in all the time than is able to get out the other end. So the most popular solution is something called RED, R-E-D, which is the acronym for Random Early Detection. It's also been known as Random Early Discard or Random Early Drop. The idea there is we don't wait to have no room, because obviously we have no room, there's nowhere to put an incoming packet. Instead, as we begin filling up, we increase the probability of discarding packets even though we've got room. And counterintuitive as that is, you can imagine that inherently causes the buffer to resist getting full. It's discarding things before it's actually full, because this is an acknowledgement of the truth that discarded packets send a message to their sender. The protocols are designed so that somebody that's sending things and stops getting them acknowledged will go, "Ooh, maybe I ought to slow down." And it's like, yes, that's the message we're trying to send you. Slow down. And so all these systems tend to throttle. The problem is that despite an amazing amount of industry being focused on this problem, as I said, acronym soup, all kinds of solutions proposed, there has never been one that works across the board, is independent of bandwidth, is independent of round-trip time, is independent of traffic type. Many of these things can be tuned for specific situations. If you knew that your bandwidth was such and such, if you knew that your typical round-trip time was going to be something, if you knew whether you had bursty traffic or more slow buffer, or if you knew you had UDP stuff or TCP, if you put all kinds of constraints on, then anybody could carefully tune a solution for a given set of traffic. The problem is we no longer have homogeneous traffic. We have a heterogeneous traffic. We've got all kinds of bizarre stuff happening, peaks and valleys, widely ranging bandwidth. In fact, what's interesting is that the problem with residential buffer bloat is largely caused by Wi-Fi. And I think it was I was watching Tom and I think it was Brian Brushwood. They were talking about Wi-Fi and maybe and like grumbling. I think he was using some sort of non-Wi-Fi wireless to do some interacting with your studios yesterday, and he went off on a rant about how useless free Wi-Fi is in coffee shops or anything. That it's horrible. It turns out that the reason that is that what we can't see is that as you move your hands around your laptop, as you rotate, as people walk by, the instantaneous bandwidth between you and the hotspot is jumping up and down and changing, and it's doing that separately for all the people who are trying to use it at the same time. I mean, it's amazing it works at all. And so as a consequence, it really doesn't work very well. So the challenge is huge. So the news is, and this is just amazing when you put it in the full context of how big a problem this has been, how intractable it has been, how the best minds in the industry have been focusing on this. In fact, even Van Jacobson, who is the co-designer of this solution, he gave a speech 6 years ago in 2006 and wrote a paper that never got published that was beginning to sniff at this, beginning to talk about this solution, but it never got adopted. Now, the other problem is one of scale, because we have big iron routers, like in level 3 and, at AT&T, with high-speed fiber optics where the actual routing is done in silicon, and we have low-end, blue box pieces of junk that cost $30 that run off of a wall wart, 5-volt power supply that have a low-power chip barely running Linux in a consumer router. And the problem is the same. It's at a different scale, but fundamentally nothing changes. And so what they were looking for was something that solved this entire problem. So this was developed by Kathleen Nichols and Van Jacobson. Van Jacobson is known for having come up with a next generation flow control for TCP. It's called the Van Jacobson's algorithm, and he is regarded as the guy who single-handedly saved the internet from collapse in the late 1980s and early 1990s. That is, the first version of TCP we're no longer using, and it would not have worked. We needed a better means of flow control, and it was Van Jacobson who came up with the algorithms everybody is using today. They're known Tahoe and Reno. You probably heard those acronyms, Leo.
I've been there, but no.
Those are some of the approaches used for congestion avoidance in TCP. So what Kathleen and Van Jacobson figured out how to do was they developed an algorithm, which I'm going to describe to you, and it's tricky, but it's one of the things that's so nice is that it absolutely fits the need. That is, it can run on and is actually running on Linux-based home routers. The Cero, CERO-WRT, does have CoDel, CODEL, the CoDel controlled delay buffer management in it now as an experimental platform. So CoDel is parameterless. There's no knobs, as they put it, for operators, users, or implementers. There's nothing that needs to be adjusted. The same algorithm can run in a $30 piece of plastic as runs, on huge big iron where all the routing is being done in silicon at the high end. Same algorithm. Unlike many of the algorithms that have been proposed, as they phrase it, it treats good queue and bad queue differently. And by that, I mean it keeps the delays low while permitting bursts of traffic. So it's exactly as I said we want. I need to make sure I use the right words and that I define these terms, because a buffer is like the static container for the data. The queue is the actual lineup of the packets. So I'm going to try to make sure I use the right terminology here. So the queue is the present the list of waiting packets that are lined up in a queue in the buffer waiting to be sent. CoDel adapts to dynamically changing link rates with no impact on utilization, and that's one of its coolest factors. There is a PDF which was published by the ACM. I'm trying to think. If you Google controlling queue delay, Leo, I think it's the first link that comes up. Controlling queue delay, and same for our listeners, of course. If anyone is interested, there's a PDF, and Figure 7 on, I think it's page 10. Looks like page 9 of the PDF shows how this performs relative to the random early detection and the tail drop algorithms in the face of changing bandwidths. And it's spectacular what they have done. And as important as anything else, it is simple and efficient. That is, because it needs to run in an underpowered chip or be easily implementable in router silicon, it's very important that it's not overly complex. So what is different from this algorithm from all prior approaches, the general acronym is AQM, Active Queue Management, and that's the term that covers any approach of any sort for trying to intercede in managing the queue, managing the list of waiting packets that are sitting in a buffer, such that you are able to respond to bursty traffic, where at the same time you discard and drop packets intelligently to send the messages to the existing algorithms that they need to throttle themselves. So what's extremely cool about this is that they maintain what they call a single state variable, which is the length of time that a packet has been in the queue. That is what they call the minimum queue length, but it's measured in milliseconds, and having more resolution ends up being good for this, and that's generally easier to do these days. They use the term packet sojourn time as the packets sojourn through the buffer, and I'll abbreviate that PST so that I'm not having to say it all the time. But so think of PST, this packet sojourn time, as the length of time a packet sits in the buffer while it's in the queue, moving forward as packets are sent out. So their algorithm is, and this is the result of extensive testing in all kinds of networking configurations, they have what they call their target acceptable PST. That is, what they call the standing queue duration is 5 milliseconds. That's the number, 5 milliseconds. So this CoDel algorithm has as its target that no packet will be in the queue longer than 5 milliseconds. That is, within it's a little bit more flexible than that. Within a maximum of 100 milliseconds, so 1/10 of a second, the queue has to have dropped to 5 milliseconds sometime within a 100 millisecond window. So this so-called PST is a minimum queue length that has to have occurred within a tenth of a second. When that PST, that packet sojourn time, has exceeded 5 milliseconds for at least 100 milliseconds, then a packet is dropped. So even when the buffer's not full, but if the length of time a packet has been in the buffer has not dropped down to their target of 5 milliseconds, any time within a 100 millisecond window, then they start discarding. Essentially, this sort of switches into a discarding mode, and they drop the first packet. The next drop time, and this gets a little hairy, but I'll explain what this means in a second. The next drop time is decreased in inverse proportion to the square root of the number of drops since the dropping state was entered.
So the more drops... Go ahead.
Yes.
Get lost there.
The next drop time is decreased. The drop time is decreased. So that means the drop rate is increased in inverse proportion to the square root of the number of drops since it began dropping. What that means in practice is it accelerates.
Faster, okay.
Yes, it gets faster until it gets back to its target of 5 milliseconds. And believe it or not, that's it. That's all there is to it. What this ends up doing is CoDel then acts, in engineering terms, as what's called a closed-loop servo system that gradually increases the frequency of dropping until the queue is controlled. And it turns out in packet switching theory, there's actually a well-known relationship of throughput to the probability of dropping, so that dropping ends up helping your throughput. And they end up then, they have on their site, and there's an appendix referred to in this PDF where they post the pseudocode, because this is all public domain. Obviously, this will be an RFC, and I hope that router vendors run to implement this. That big router vendors like Cisco and so forth offer firmware updates, and even little router, Linksys and the Cisco Soho routers offer firmware to implement this, because it turns out it is simple to do. Even this inverse square root drop probability, it turns out that the inverse square root can be computed efficiently using only integer multiplication. So even that, isn't going to cause any great problem. And the entire algorithm is implemented with just 4 variables. The first, the time of the first drop, the time to drop the next packet, the count of the numbers dropped since going into the drop state, and then just a Boolean that says whether we are currently dropping or not. And so it is really simple to do this. It's no more complex than statistically dropping at a probability based on how long the queue is, which is the RED, the random early drop or detection approach. It is simple to do. In their paper, they demonstrate exactly this Wi-Fi nightmare of rapidly changing bandwidths. And for example, they start off at time 0 with a 100 megabit channel. Then they drop it to 1/10 of that to 10 megabits. Then again by a factor of 10 to 1 megabit, and then jump it up to 50, and then up to 1 megabit, and then down to 10 again. And they show for all of those changes what CoDel does versus what the standard buffer management of either random early detection or tail drop does. And it's shocking well CoDel performs. It very quickly adapts. It responds to the change, and this closed loop servo that I described drops intelligently starts dropping to keep the overall delay through the buffer short, yet also signaling in an optimal fashion to any TCP traffic that is going through that it needs to slow itself down. And the consequence is essentially we have, after decades of trying, we've got this problem solved.
Yeah, except you can't only get it in one router.
Yeah, nobody has it yet.
And I doubt this is the kind of thing you can do in firmware. Maybe could you do it in firmware and update?
Absolutely.
You could. So it's just software.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, firmware is maintaining it probably in a brain dead fashion. Just having a buffer, and it's probably huge. It's probably
So the fact that they've got these giant buffers because they have so much RAM is controlled by firmware. So you can change how this works.
Exactly.
Even if you have all the hardware, you don't have to use it.
And that's been the problem, is that our Soho buffers in our Soho routers, they now have buffers that are multiple seconds long in terms of our upstream bandwidth. So when we're uploading something or trying to play like a game while somebody else is doing something in terms of bulk bandwidth transit, suddenly all of your interactivity, all of the game interactivity just disappears, because this even though it's well-meaning, this Soho buffer fills up and it's several seconds of delay. Well, the bulk transit, the data being moved, doesn't care. But somebody who's trying to do an interactive online game, it just comes to a stop. Because, several seconds. Think about that. You and I could not be having a conversation. We've all, seen newscasters, trying to talk to somebody via a satellite delay. And, you have to have some skill in order to, control yourself and wait for that satellite delay and manage that kind of delay. It's really difficult when you want to be interactive and operating in real time. So what they've got is something with minimal processing, minimal state. One of the things that they're very proud of is that they only need to track the minimum delay through the buffer. They do not need the average, and that's significant.
That's a big
because
difference.
Yes, in terms of computation, to do the average, you need to add up all the delays and divide by the number of packets. To do the minimum, all you need to do is see what the timestamp of the packet as you're removing it is, and that's how long that guy's been there. And then you maintain the smallest one you've seen within a window of 100 milliseconds. And if that's never down at your target of 5 milliseconds, anytime during a tenth of a second, then you kick into beginning to discard, and you increase the rate that you're discarding until you bring it down. So it's got some state in it. It kind of switches into we need to start signaling to the people who are using this buffer that they need to back off, and it does it in a way that just seamlessly fits with the Internet's protocols. So, having this is the first step. Getting it ratified, getting the word out, and getting it then moved into firmware gives us some hope that we're going to get this Bufferbloat problem solved. But users can keep an eye on firmware for their own routers, because remember, the problem we have is where we go from high bandwidth to low bandwidth. That's the choke point, that funnel problem. And all home networks have 100 megabit local networks suddenly squeezing into a 2 megabit uplink through a DSL or cable modem. That's where their buffers fill up. And so that's where we need this problem. And what would happen is this would then provide signaling back to the machines in the network to slow down in order to allow the residential buffer to stay real time, yet actually increasing the overall throughput. Counterintuitive as that is, they show charts where they show the throughput under these varying conditions, even though they're discarding intelligently, and it's right up at between 90 and 100%, whereas the traditional algorithms collapse down into the low tens of % of overall throughput. It's fantastic.
Steve Gibson explains all. And now if we can only get the router guys to put it in, we'd be good. If you want to follow along in the transcript, a couple of people instead of the chat room, I'm going to read this one. You can go to the website, grc.com. That's where Steve lives. He puts transcripts and 16-kilobit versions of the show, audio versions of the show there every week. You can also get full video and audio versions at our site, twit.tv/SN. Steve will be answering questions next week, right?
Well, will I?
Oh, it's the 4th of July.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, the memo I got said that
take the day off.
Guys, you're going to that we're not going to be pre-recording.
That's a shock.
I know.
Do you want to do a pre-recording? I can check. I'll check. I'll check with the people. I'll check with the people. Okay. But you're right. It is the 4th of July next Wednesday, isn't it?
It's the 4th of July. I had assumed we would find some other time to record, but I got a note saying, nope, there will be no pre-recording of podcasts. I was like,
Lisa's trying to protect me.
That's exactly it. It did come from Lisa.
Yeah, she's very aggressively protecting my time. But she doesn't understand that this show must go on. We don't miss episodes of this show.
We never have.
Never have.
No.
Let me check and I'll get back to you. But meanwhile, if you have a question, if it's this week or next, go to securitynow.com/feedback and fill out the feedback form.
Yes.
We will do a Q&A episode in our next episode, which is unknown when that will be. And, of course, there's lots of other good stuff there, not just SpinRite, the world's finest hard drive maintenance and recovery utility. You must have it. But it works even on SSDs. But also lots of other great stuff that Steve gives away for free because he's just a nice person. GRC, Gibson Research Corporation, grc.com. You can follow Steve on Twitter at SGGRC. He's also got some other, he's got a VLC for the very low carb, SGVLC. He's got SG Pad for the pads. I'm hoping we're going to get one of these new Nexus tablets in here. We can
the Nexus
take
7,
a look at that.
Yes.
Yeah, it looks pretty sweet. We'll have details on that. Thank you, Steve. And you know what, folks, go to the calendar at twit.tv and it will have whenever the next recording is will be on the calendar.
And anybody who's following me on Twitter, when I know what the story is, I will tweet it and let people know.
Very good. Thank you, Steve. Steve Gibson.
Thanks, Leo.
Have a great day. We'll be back next time. Unknown when, but next time. Security Now.
Security Now.